Hello, and welcome to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, integrity deficit disorder. We have our guest today, Douglas Bauer. Doug, if you permit that, yes. Most people, when they buy your book, it's going to be Douglas.
Well, I'm willing to live with the split personality. No, I go by Doug for everybody. So thank you.
Okay, sure. And let's see. You've recently launched your book, this novel, and the novel is The Beckoning World. And my first question is, what did you have prepared when you began at once, or was it all scattered everywhere? Was it outlined? Beckoning. Why the beckoning world? There's just so much out there to have fun with. Is that what that is?
Well, fun, but also with I think a bit of seriousness in it too. Just that the characters in my novel are beckoned by the world, but each character defines that word world in his or her own way. And really, I think the movement, if you will, of the characters and the plot is a matter of the reader just following the ways in which the world beckons my characters, and in the ways in which the definition of what it means to be beckoned changes over the course of the novel. A kind of a redefinition, reordering of priorities. So that's really what beckoning means, at least as I see it.
Well, being the batting coach, you're also the umpire, your own umpire.
No, you set the rules and enforce them as best you can. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always wanted to do that, to study writing. But I don't think I'm going to get to Massachusetts this lifetime, but you never know. I've been there.
Well,
but,
you never know.
Didn't stay long. That's right. I have looked at the material that they gave me, Lissa, and who's very good at what she does. And the information that I got was the reviews were good. I mean, you probably know that already.
I do, and very pleased. Yeah.
Now, as I went through the PDF, through the book, I'm rolling along, and all of a sudden I see this thing that says Book 1. And I thought, wait a second, has Doug got Book 2 already on the frying pan?
Yeah. Well, I guess another way to put that would have been Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Obviously, it's all under between the same covers as the story proceeds. But I think there's the parts, if you will, or the books, as I call them, are so different one from another in the book,
right?
That I guess I just sort of subconsciously thought of each section as self-contained, if you will, of having its own sort of book length, book shape. So the term, that's what the term means as I'm using it.
Well, it got my attention, I can tell you that.
Well, good. That's job one for a writer. Get the reader's attention.
I spent 30 years on thinking about a book, and I finally got to it. But I had no idea about the marketing. And then I just got mad at him.
That's not an unreasonable response. You get mad.
And I'm still busy, and
Well,
I'm
that's
sure with what you're doing now. How often are you teaching every day or every semester?
every semester, but it's a manageable workload. I teach in a master's in fine arts program at Bennington College in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
But the nature of the residency, or the nature of the program, I should say, is what they call a low residency format, which means that most of the teaching you do with your students takes place electronically. You move material back and forth over the internet, and then you meet with them on campus, one-to-one, and in workshops, just for a few weeks each semester. Mm-hmm. So it allows you to work at home. I mean, this is sort of we did this before the pandemic, so we kind of anticipated what it means to work at home with the way the program is structured.
Yeah. I've worked at home for a long time now. Long time, since the 80s.
Great, yeah.
And I like it. Yeah. Sometimes I just got to get up and walk around the block. For
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Your book itself, was there one particular scene that was something you struggled with, or that you were thinking about it, something different? What is it? What do you think?
Well, that's an interesting question, John. And I would say that the scene that took the most out of me, emotionally and intellectually, one of the characters, if you will, in the novel is the 1918 Spanish flu, the first pandemic. And, there was pure coincidence that I had that element in my book when the pandemic we're now going through arrived. I started the book long before the pandemic arrived. Anyway, the scene that I have in mind is one of the main characters in the novel, a young woman named Emily, dies of the flu. And trying to narrate, if you will, her death scene, because as I'm sure you know, that flu struck very, very vividly and quickly. People would die in a day. Yes. And that's what happens to my character. She's got a little headache in the morning and she's dead that night. And to take her through her suffering and her husband, who's attending to her, his suffering and watching it, was certainly the most involving scene, I would say, in the novel. And I felt, it was the hardest to get right. It's the one that I felt I needed most to try to do justice to. You don't kill off your characters lightly. And I liked Emily as a character and as a person a lot. So anyways, to answer your question, that was the scene that I suppose provided the most challenge for me, just imaginatively.
The locations that you had was on the farm,
right?
And as I went through this, through the prologue, it started me going back when I was, 6 or 7 years old, in the 50s, and my grandparents were sharecroppers.
Really?
Yeah, and it was a small town called Dareville, as the Kentucky turns into Tennessee.
Sure.
Across that border. Yeah. So as I
Yeah.
began looking at that and seeing that, a lot of it just came back to me, and it was
Well, that's wonderful. We share a biography, John. I mean, I was also 6 or 7 years old in the early 50s, and I grew up on a grain farm in Iowa. My father was a corn and bean grower, and his father, my grandfather, before him, on the same farm. So it was quite natural in a certain way to set the novel there, knowing it as well as I did. Yeah,
of course, yeah. I mean, you done it. You might as well write it.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. They always say, write what you know. So.
But then some people don't think about that.
Well, I've certainly written a lot about places I never lived and don't know, except in my imagination. Right. And it's a different relationship to the material. Mm-hmm. You're consulting your imagination entirely. If you're writing about something you have a personal experience with, you have to do that work, but you also have memories to draw on and
of course,
impressions coming back from whenever you had those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it was just, I'd say probably 10 years ago, one of my uncles passed, and it drew me back to Adairville. And, had a small town with a square. And I remembered all of that. It was just, I need to spend more time back there. But, how do you create time? You got a secret? How to create time?
I wish I did. If I did, that's all I would be paying attention to, is the creation of time rather than the creation of stories. It moves ever more swiftly. Time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you, at the end of the day, you say, well, where did the time go? What did I do today? Just totally. Yeah. But I've begun to deal with it. I'm more, I guess, in a way, for those that live with me, I've become more loving to them, only because I'm getting rid of some of that anger that I've learned in Vietnam.
Yeah.
The baseball part. I didn't get to that, but I will. I bought your book. Amazon's going to deliver it tomorrow or the next day.
Great.
And tell us about Babe Ruth. And
sure. Well, the idea for this novel actually came from something I read in the newspaper. It's based on a true event.
Oh, really?
That happened in 1927. It was very common in Major League Baseball at that time, when the season had finished, and in Babe Ruth's case with the New York Yankees, when the World Series was over, because they were almost always in it.
Right.
They got on a train and took a barnstorming tour across the country and played exhibition games. Mm-hmm. So they'd stop in all these little towns, and it was an enormous event for the town that was hosting them, of course, this legend arriving in their town. And in the instance that I read about in the newspaper, Babe Ruth and also Lou Gehrig, who was much younger than Babe Ruth, about a decade younger, and just starting his famous career, took this train trip and played in all these little towns. And one of the towns they played in was Sioux City, Iowa. And because I grew up in Iowa, that caught my eye. And I just began to imagine what it would be, what it would have been like for the citizens of Sioux City to have Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig arrive in their town and play an exhibition game, and then get on the train and go to Omaha where they played next,
Right.
and
Right.
I just found all that just almost mythological in its possibilities, with these legends arriving and departing,
Sure.
and the impact they would have, and the impressions they would leave. So anyway, that's what started the book. That was what gave me the idea.
Right.
And I'll tell you one more thing. You asked about Babe Ruth.
Uh-huh.
It was interesting to create a fictional version of someone who had actually lived. And in the case of Ruth and Lou Gehrig, I had to do that. And I have a good friend here in the Boston, Cambridge area, another writer named Lee Montville, who is a wonderful biographer and he wrote a biography of Babe Ruth. So I asked him to have lunch, and I said, so give me some, anything you might be able to impart, wisdom that will help me write this fictional Babe Ruth. And he said, well, here's the thing you need to remember. Babe Ruth was the most hyperbolic human being who ever lived. So no matter what you might invent, you're not going to go over the top. Chances are he did that and and much more. And that gave me a great permission not to be concerned, that I just let my imagination fly.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun, and it really turned out to be easier to create him and Gehrig than the truly fictional characters.
Right. Well, that must have been motivating for sure. Of course, I was. If you were 6 or 7 in the 50s, then you know who Mickey Mantle is.
Of course,
Roger just had his record broken by
Roger Maris.
Roger Maris, and it was Aaron Judge just this year.
That's right, another Yankee.
Yeah, and that's something. Did you see they renewed his contract?
I did.
A 9-year deal, and I kept thinking, boy, if I had only stuck with baseball.
Yeah.
Because I did play.
I did too, and I've always been an enormous fan of the sport as a player and as a spectator both. So yeah, it was fun to just sort of put myself in the skin of those actual players.
Well, I'm glad you wrote this book. I really am.
Well, good.
It motivated me to buy it, and now I sit on the front porch just waiting for the guy to come by.
Yeah,
it's FedEx or UPS, one or the other. But it's a good book.
That's very
I gave
nice
some of it to my wife, and she said, "Yeah, it's worth it." Yeah, she said that.
Well, that's great.
She rules. If you want to know who the empire is around here, that's her.
Same with mine.
Well, I'm glad that you had the time for me today, and my audience. They're going to get a kick out of this too, and they're going to be thinking about the book. And I'm pretty sure that some of the things we talked about today is going to motivate them and put them in a moto vehicle and get themselves to a bookstore.
Well, I'm very grateful to you for the opportunity, and it's really fun to talk about it with you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you could do this, and please tell my audience, my listeners, where to find your book or where to contact you.
Well, I have a website, douglasbauer.com, and my last name is spelled Bauer, so it's all one word, douglasbauer.com. So you can order the book, and you can read a little excerpt from the book by going to my website. But it's also available from all the usual suspects, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And if you have to your listeners, if you have an independent bookstore anywhere nearby where you live, I'd urge you to give them your business. The independent bookstore is a hugely important part of the lives of those of us who write for a living.
Right.
And it's always good to support your local business. So those are many of the places you could order the book, from which you could order the book.
Right. And they should. And I bet you they do.
Well, thank you so much, John.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I want to thank my listeners for tuning in again. And I want to thank them for tuning in all the times that they've tuned in. And the adios goes like this. So long and happy trails to all.